All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, in a recent spot on the Paul Feinbaum show, the Post and Courier's Scott Hamilton talked about North Carolina and the fact that they may have a handshake agreement in place with the SEC to join their league. And of course, bolt the ACC if that opportunity were to present itself in the future. Now, last week when I talked about the rumors about North Carolina and the AC and the SEC, I knew that it wasn't going to go away anytime soon, simply because where there is smoke, there is also indeed fire. And if this is true, and North Carolina is able to get their way, which it looks like, Tobacco Road will never be the same. Okay, because when you think about Tobacco Road, you think about the ACC. And it's one of those where when you think about Tobacco Road, you think about Duke, you think about North Carolina State, and Wake Forest as well, all calling the Tar Heel State home and all being members of the ACC. And then getting back to Tobacco Road, there's rivalries, and then there's Duke and North Carolina when it comes to basketball. I mean, it's one of those like I talked about last week. We have seen some rivalries go by the wayside, unfortunately, due to realignment revolving around college football. There's been some big ones, but can you imagine a college basketball world without Duke and Carolina in the same conference together? That's like putting Auburn and Alabama in different leagues and saying, you know what, let's just push the Iron Bowl to the side. It would never be the same. Okay, and you look at the lawsuits that were brought forth by Clemson and Florida State to try to get out of the grants of rights with the ACC. And I think since those lawsuits, they have indeed opened up Pandora's box for schools from this league to have themselves an out to try to get more money from the Big Ten or the SEC. Remember, each year that passes, that exit fee to leave the ACC drops, and a lot of people are targeting the year of 2030 as far as it could be a potential like time for a lot of schools or schools that are looking to get out to leave as the exit fees are going to dip. Now, aside from North Carolina, may Virginia have a similar deal in place with the Big Ten already? There's rumors about it as well, as according to Sports Illustrated, they might, as we're talking about two of the ACC's originals in Virginia and North Carolina, looking for a way out of this league. Now, yes, the ACC is a power conference, but at the end of the day, all this comes down to is that financial gap between the Big Ten and the SEC. And every time that the Big Ten gets themselves a new deal, every time that the SEC gets themselves a new deal, there's going to be some schools in the other leagues that are happy and content with what they have. And there's going to be others that are going to say, hey, why can't we get a piece of this? And then, of course, everything with Clemson and Florida State, Jim Phillips attempting to try to sweeten the pot to keep them happy and give them more revenue. Everybody else is looking and saying, hey, why not us? Now, if North Carolina and Virginia were to leave the ACC in 2030, can this league be able to survive multiple defections in 2030? Now, on the surface, I'm going to say yes, and the reason is because ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips has attempted to try to keep this ship afloat. Last year, the ACC brought in California and Stanford from the original Pac-12, and then of course they brought in SMU. All three of these schools took less revenue for several years in order to join the ACC, which helped out the likes of Clemson and Florida State. But even with that, Phillips is going to have his hands full in order to try to prevent this ship from sinking. You look at Clemson and Florida State; they're still looking to leave. Okay. and you're hearing the stuff about North Carolina and possibly at Virginia, you have to ask yourself who else is ready to or looking to jump ship from the ACC. Because remember, you basically had like seven schools that were giving support to Clemson and Florida State during the legal process. So you have to wonder, is somebody else going to look to jump ship, and are they going to jump ship in 2030? It's one of those where, let's just say, for the sake of argument, that there's going to be several schools aside from North Carolina and Virginia that were or are going to leave the ACC in 2030. Would this league be able to find the members to possibly replace them? That might be tougher a little this time around. It's going to be a little bit tougher because you figure you're not going to pull anybody from the Big Ten if you're the ACC. You're not going to pull anybody from the SEC. The Big 12 looks like they're getting their stuff together. Okay, and you have to wonder, about the new Pac-12, and I'm going to touch on that a little more in a few moments. But nonetheless, each time when these media deals are up in college football, there is always a conference that unfortunately bites the dust. And it's usually the conference that either does not have the best leadership or they lack leadership. I mean, or they lack unity, excuse me. But for me, I do find Jim Phillips to be a solid leader of the ACC. Okay. But he has been unable to maintain unity, which is a telling sign, and it could be something that we see really unraveling down the road for this league, and it could be the undoing of Phillips, and it could be the undoing of the ACC. And again, like I said before, it's all about that financial gap between the ACC when you put them up against the Big Ten and the SEC. Now, 2030 is several years away. And the ACC does have time. And I said this last week, but they also don't have time. And my thing is this: you look at the direction that things could possibly be going in for the ACC. Should they move on from Jim Phillips as their conference commissioner and do it now in a way to try to salvage things? I'm just throwing it out there as a possibility. I'm not sure if it's going to help things because, first of all, you have to get everybody on the same page, and that's tough when you have so many mouths to feed and trying to keep everybody happy. Number two, if you're the ACC, what can you possibly do to close the financial gap between yourselves and the Big Ten and the SEC? There's not that much that you can honestly do. I said this before a couple of years ago when the announcement was made about USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten. I said then, good luck keeping up with that league. Why? Because now the Big Ten had the three biggest media markets in this country in their back pocket, and they could talk turkey with any big network. Hence why the Big Ten is working with Fox. They're also working with CBS, and of course, they're working with NBC. You think about the brands that the SEC has behind them. That's something that the ACC doesn't have. The ACC also does not have the markets that the Big Ten has. So honestly, at the end of the day, good luck trying to keep up with the Joneses, if you will, if you're that league. So it's one of those where I've talked about the rumors with North Carolina to the SEC, and of course the rumors about Virginia to the Big Ten. But also, could the Big 12 and possibly the new Pac-12 go shopping if the ACC were to go under? I bring this up because listen, Carolina and Virginia, they are not alone in looking to get out of this league. Okay. And what's to say that we could not see a mass exodus? Well, just for the sake of argument, let's say Carolina gets their way, they go to the SEC. Let's say Virginia ends up in the Big Ten. All right, that would put the Big Ten at 19. That would put the SEC at 17. I don't see either one of those leagues staying pat on an even number. So I think if you're the Big Ten and you're going to get you're going to get schools from the ACC, you're going to get two. You're going to get yourself a dance partner to join in Virginia. If you're the SEC, you're definitely going to get a dance partner with a North Carolina. It would all be interesting to see who that would be. So nonetheless, let's say that scenario works out like that. If you're The ACC, you're still at 13 schools, but are you going to be able to keep everybody happy there? Are you going to be able to keep everybody unified? The one thing I will say, the Big 12 has their stuff together under Brett Yormark. They are a more unified conference than the ACC is right now. And like I said before, the conferences that are not unified are the ones that don't survive. The conferences who are the ones do survive. And if you're the Big 12, could you possibly lure somebody away from the ACC? They might not get SEC Big Ten type money, but nonetheless, they would be protected. So that's an option right there. And then I brought up the Pac 12 because, listen, a lot of people scoffed at Washington State and Oregon State when they said, listen, we are going to attempt to rebuild this league. They have. Could the new Pac 12, if you will, be a refuge for a Stanford and Cal if they wanted to decide to come back home? I'm just throwing it out as a possibility. Nothing is set in stone. We have to see. But nonetheless, I truly do think if North Carolina gets their way and if Virginia gets their way, this is going to be a huge domino effect. And I think we are about to see a bevy of ramifications in regards to realignment in college football over the next several years. I think the latest moves, okay, were with the Pac-12 getting the five schools from the Mountain West being able to try to hold on, and now the battle between the Mountain West and the Pac-12. I've talked about Memphis and UNLV recently, but nonetheless, I think this ACC situation right here revolving around North Carolina is going to be very juicy. And the other thing is this: if the ACC were to take a step back power wise, depending on who leaves that league and who stays, where does that leave Notre Dame? And I not from a football aspect because Notre Dame is taken care of football wise. They have they're an independent, of course. They're with NBC, and like I said before, Notre Dame is not joining a conference anytime soon for football, especially after the money that they took home last year after the college football playoff. You can forget about that. But the thing is, Notre Dame right now is able to have their cake and they're able to eat it as well. Why? Because you have a situation where they're an independent, they get their money from NBC for that for their home games, but also the affiliation with the ACC, they get a taste of that. They play five conference games or basically five games against the ACC. And of course, if they played one more against the ACC, they'd have to be a part of that league. And of course, Notre Dame doesn't do that. Notre Dame teased with the Big East, years ago, and now they've teased with the ACC for football. And you just have to wonder if Notre Dame being affiliated with your conference is the kiss of death. And honestly, like I said before, Notre Dame is going to have their cake and they're going to eat it too because their money is solidified. So with what could possibly happen with the ACC? Where does that leave Notre Dame as far as a conference affiliation for the rest of their sports? A lot of things could possibly happen with this. But at the end of the day, what is next for the Atlantic Coast Conference? My biggest thing is like you hear about these the stuff with North Carolina, and then of course, the battle with Clemson and Florida State. How sturdy of a ground is this league on right now? I think that's the big question that people have to ask themselves. Why? Because I've seen rumors like this start with the original Big East, the Pac 12, and the Big 12. And of course, in all of those cases, it never worked out for those leagues. I know that the Big 12 is still around, but clearly it is not the same Big 12 that it was when they first opened up for business nearly 30 years ago. Nebraska, Texas, Oklahoma, they're all not there, and Missouri, okay, and Texas A&M. But nonetheless, this is how it starts, and I don't see Jim Phillips, and I'm rooting for him, okay, and I'm rooting for the ACC, but I don't see a scenario where this works out. And 5 years from now, we're going to see the same ACC. I mean, listen, 10 years ago, if you had told me that USC and UCLA would be in the Big Ten right now, I would have looked at you like you were crazy. Okay, clearly that's not the case. But nonetheless, the ACC, I think they're going to do everything possible, they're going to try their hardest to keep this thing together and keep this ship afloat. Easier said than done. But when you start hearing stuff about schools having possible handshake agreements and things like that, it ain't looking good. I think North Carolina is looking at things and they're looking at the landscape and they're saying, hey, you know what? Let's get off of this ship while it's still afloat. And of course, it would be truly unfortunate to not have Duke and Carolina in the same league anymore. But nonetheless, you would talk about North Carolina's potential new rivalries in the SEC with the likes of bordering states such as South Carolina and Tennessee. And then again, yes, you would lose Duke and North Carolina, which is legendary for basketball, but then you'd also gain North Carolina and Kentucky for basketball, which definitely would be must see TV in its own. Would the SEC want to take a Clemson? I'm not sure. Would South Carolina want to share that state with Clemson? I'm not sure. I mean, Clemson has become a football power under head coach Dabo Sweeney, and of course, you wouldn't want to pass that opportunity by. Where would the Big Ten go if they were to take somebody else from the ACC along with Virginia? These are all questions we've got to see how things play out. But nonetheless, the ACC is truly a house divided right now, and that ain't good. Okay, because when you have a situation like this, it ain't going to work out, and I'm not sure if there's enough big players out there to keep the ACC afloat as far as them prying a team away from another league if they're going to lose some of the potential schools that are looking to leave. That is going to be the big question. Will the ACC survive the next round of realignment? 2030 is going to be very telling from this league. And I guarantee you, the schools that want to leave, and they're already talking about the fact of how much the exit fees dip by 2030 to leave this league. I guarantee you they're starting to get their money together. They're working with boosters, they're working with alumni, you name it. And if they're talking about leaving now in 2025, it's not a matter of if, it's more like when. And that when is looking like 2030 when the landscape of the Atlantic Coast Conference is going to shift. And anytime you talk about basically founding members of a conference looking to leave, I guarantee you it's going to be a mass exodus. And some of those who are saying that they're all in on the ACC right now, that could just be right now. 2030 is 5 years from now. A lot can change. And if you start to see three, four, or five schools leave a conference, the other guys want to get off of that ship while it's still afloat. This ACC thing, it ain't going away anytime soon. Will this power conference be able to survive this? We've got to sit back and watch. But right now, it ain't looking good. But folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for checking out the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. And if you like what you have heard and saw on this podcast, or heard and seen on this podcast, excuse me, please feel free to hit that like button as well as subscribing to this channel. Like I always say, it is greatly appreciated. Also, for all of you college football fans out there, I've been talking about it and I'm going to keep talking about it. Beginning this Friday, August the 1st, I am going to be giving you a conference by conference breakdown for this month, or for the coming month, of the upcoming college football season. That conference by conference breakdown also includes my top 25 for the upcoming season, as well as my projections for the college football playoff. Also, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, be sure to check me out at 300 Pounds of Sports. And if you give me that follow, I will give you the follow in return. And that also can be said for Instagram, where you can check me out at 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge. And also, if you're on Facebook, you can check us out at the Sports Depot 365. And as far as I'm concerned, one of the better sports debating groups going on social media. But until next time, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I am signing off, and I'm saying thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.